Today we're joined by Sarah Glennane, the CEO of the Screen Composers Guild of Ireland, to talk to us about the Port Shorts. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Sarah.
Just tell us a little bit about the experience that composers have actually had working in producing works during the pandemic.
Hiya, Sarah. It's lovely to join you here for the Port Shorts. Yeah, composers would be quite used to working in isolation and working remotely. They would tend to be apart from the other elements, say in a live action film. But obviously they require work in order to be work. So in terms of the infrastructure and in terms of how they've coped in adjusting their work, it's been quite seamless, and it's a little bit like everyone is joining them in the normal. But obviously not having content to create music for has affected them in some areas more than others. Animation has been very adaptable and has largely continued working. Any composers that were on animations when it started generally were able to finish that work and maybe have got more. And the same with advertising, which of course, you know, is a very I suppose, what would you say, innovative sector anyway, you know, and certainly can adapt. So there was good advertising work coming through fairly shortly, say by May, June, nearly in the last lockdown, and has continued. And then obviously this, the production, the return to live action has been great. And the fact that there is so much demand for content has been great as well, and is great. So it's just about managing workloads and ensuring that, you know, they can take advantage of maybe a sudden amount. Also, composers would be quite used to, say, having fallow periods in their working year anyway. So they, through having royalty income, they can kind of manage to survive generally. So it's really important that royalties and copyright continue to be looked after, I think, for our creatives.
Yeah. And I think it's like one of the challenges that applicants to the Port Short Film Prize are going to face is that we're not sure how long the current pandemic conditions are going to last. And the one thing we're asking filmmakers is, in the applications that they're putting forward, to really ensure that their ideas and their projects would be kind of, I guess, COVID safe and COVID friendly in terms of how they approach the brief. And, you know, that's kind of what led us to having this conversation, this idea that perhaps giving sound a slightly more considered role is one way that filmmakers might choose to go about it. And I guess it's kind of quite a broad open-ended question. If you were talking to filmmakers who were looking at approaching the Port Short brief and either had experience or haven't worked with a sound composer before, would you have one or two pieces of advice or kind of nuggets of knowledge they should keep in mind?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's, to me, sound and music is a huge part of that, but that creates the ceiling on the world that you're inviting your audience into. So the idea is to try and kind of bubble your audience into your make-believe world, and they're completely committed to it and completely invested in it. So sound is a huge part of that, because if what your eyes are seeing isn't adding up to what your ears are hearing, there leaves a kind of an escape route for the audience to kind of to leave through, or for their imagination to be stalled. So in terms of that, I think bring sound, like if you're considering your narrative, what's the story that you're trying to tell, what's the world you're trying to create here, just to consider sound and music and what role they will play in that early on in your script and development. I think, like, for example, if you were to document this really unusual time, like sound was something that we noticed very early on in the first lockdown. People were commenting on how much more birdsong they could hear. They were commenting on the lack of noise pollution from cars and from airplanes, and generally noticing the difference. Like, I can imagine if you were to walk down Grafton Street today, the sound would be as impactful in its absence as it would be, you know, say if you're walking down on a Christmas Eve on a normal year where there's just this, you know, huge variety of sounds. And if you're thinking of walking past, you know, a pub with a session on and you're hearing that music coming out, all those sounds are absent from our world at the moment. So I think that really tells a huge story. So that would be an example of where you're kind of weaving the sound and thinking, how will sound and music play a part in my narrative, and how can I bring it into the story so that it's not, sometimes I think people think music is an incidental element which you add in post-production, that it's like a color, and while it is involved in the creating the color of your story, it's also hugely important in the narrative. And as one of our composers said, it can tell the story that dialogue or action maybe can't. So it can maybe tell the emotional story, or set the scene, like in the eeriness of the silence, or the kind of over amplification of sound. You can hear, you know, sometimes if someone's agoraphobic, if a character is agoraphobic, you can really create that feeling in the audience by having that kind of echoey, reverby sound of voices. So that sound and music is just, it's just a really important part of that, you know.
It's, I know kind of personally in some of my own favorite films, and kind of I guess the small number of them that I go back to on repeat, the soundtrack, the music, the atmosphere is kind of, it's as integral to the story as the work,
Yeah.
the actors themselves. But I kind of, you know, in what we're talking about here today, I wonder if you might kind of give us a couple of examples of, say, if filmmakers want to go out and have a look at how sound is used in some local kind of Irish made films to maybe create atmosphere in, say,
Yeah.
contrast to as kind of making kind of film scores.
Yeah, well, I think Lenny Abrahamson and his films are absolutely masterful in that area. And Stephen Rennicks is the composer who's worked on all of them. He is such a beautiful use of music. He's an incredible lightness in touch sometimes in how he approaches where the score weaves into the story, and how the instrumentation kind of adds to it. And his work you can see as well in Rosie's, in Paddy Brannock's film, and Viva, and lots of other films. But back at the Lenny Abrahamson, certainly Garage, it would be a film I would tell anyone to go to, which is very sparse in music, but it makes a very strong use of ambient sound. It really places you in the world of the garage, that kind of off the main archery kind of town that's been maybe a little bit left behind because a motorway is 10 miles away or whatever. And the use of the ambient sound, I think, is really, really strong in that. And the same with Room. Um, and other than that, yeah, there's a short which I think is long listed for the Oscars at the moment, which was made with the Ari Alexi, the Screen Directors Guild. I think it's called The White Horse. That as well has good use of sound and no music. I should be selling the music more, but they're just examples just for the soundscape. And then music, I'd find it hard to say one over the other. I just think listen really, really carefully to everything. I mean, sometimes something might really resonate with me, which wouldn't so much with you. And similarly with filmmakers and all audiences. I think the main similarities you'll find where it's done very well is that it has been started early in the development process. A lot of thought has gone into it, as much thought maybe as in the visual aspects of the filmmaking, and then it's being really carefully considered as opposed to left to a very last kind of edit job. So I think that would be my main piece of advice, actually, is what money can't buy you, time will really help you, and educating yourself, it can be done as easily as just watching TV, watching both feature and drama, and being aware as well of the limitations of your TV sound. It's a pity we're not able to go back into cinema, but just to see how it adds to the storytelling process, and to the your connection with characters, or with the action. Yeah.
Sorry, yeah. And so, Sarah, would you tell me a little bit more about the Screen Composers Guild of Ireland, and for filmmakers, in what way can they be working with yourselves or communicating with yourselves to actually kind of be exploring these ideas?
Yeah, so the Screen Composers Guild was set up just 3 years ago, as a group of composers approached me, and we talked about setting up a guild, which was really about increasing visibility of composers and music within the audiovisual industries here, and to try and create a pathway for communication, and bring composers in, because they do work in isolation. They are often left separate, and they're often coming in at the end, maybe. And so we felt there was a need to create more visibility, and been really welcomed and really supported in our journey. And I think it was a good thing to come in. So we are in the process of developing resources for filmmakers. One of our first resources is a directory of professional composers who are members of the Guild. So go on to screencomposersguild.ie and check out our directory there. You can also email me at sarah@screencomposersguild.ie, and I can send you on guidelines on working with composers, from how to find one, how to shortlist or commission a composer, contracting, creating a deal memo. And I think they're all really important to include, no matter what size your budget or your project is that the kind of the first step in any creative collaboration is mutual respect, and working kind of in a professional manner together, so that there's enough space for creativity to flow, if you know what I mean. So so I think the first protocol would be go to the directory and check out composers. We also have associate members who wouldn't qualify for the professional criteria that we have, and I can supply a database of them, and they would be, say, if you're a first-time filmmaker, it can be really great to engage with a composer. They would all have some level of experience, just may not have worked on professional jobs, but would be very competent. And other areas that we work in the Guild is we provide skills and training, and collegial opportunities for a community to form. So I think that's really valuable, and it will be really valuable to the industry as a whole, because composers, want to do their job better and learn. And I think sharing of experience and knowledge is really valuable in that space.
Absolutely. And it sounds like wonderful work that yourself and your colleagues are doing. It's very heartening to hear. So thank you. And I think it's kind of it's been really lovely to have this conversation, and just to take your advice on how filmmakers who perhaps haven't worked with a sound composer before might actually think about approaching music and sound and noise in a way that perhaps they haven't done before, or how that may play a role in their port short submissions. So
Yeah,
Sarah,
I,
thank you.
I think if I was to give final words of advice, I would certainly, at a script level, read the script and consider what can music add to this, what can sound add to this. And I think it's lovely to have a theme, such as Dublin. It's a place, so you can think, what would music is a great way of informing your audience quite quickly about things, so you can tell them about what era you're presenting it in, or what the location is, or if you're talking about somebody who is new to Dublin, but living in Dublin, perhaps there's music from their home culture that could come in interwoven into Dublin, and that's a really quick way of creating a very strong connection to the story for your audience. So I think it's a great opportunity, and best of luck to all your applicants.
Sarah, thank you so much. We really very, very sincerely appreciate you taking the time. So thank you.
Thanks a million, Sarah.